Welcome to the October 30th OpenJ9 Eclipse community call. As we usually do, we'll open things up for any community questions or discussion. Don't have a lightning talk lined up for this week, though we do have a website update tentatively scheduled in for November 6th from Sue. If there are other lightning talks people would like to give, please reach out and we'll get them scheduled in. I will take a look at the recent user-raised issues and see if there's anything that we need to take a look at. One that came in today is there's a problem with compact strings. So we'll need to take a look at that. Right now, I believe we still default to compact strings being off. I've pinged Philip on this as he's been heavily involved in the work, and hopefully we can get somebody to take a look at this soon. The crash here was opened a couple of days ago, and it looks like we understand what the issue is, and so now, and there's an open PR for it. Excellent. So that should hopefully be resolved soon. There's an issue with breakpoints not being recognized. I don't see much of a discussion on that. So, all right, Mike is taking a look. Good. So we've got somebody taking a look here. Hopefully, again, we'll get some updates soon. And OpenJ9 does not work with many Minecraft mods. All right, we've asked for some data, but don't have it yet. All right. And then when I look at the, actually that was also open 7 days ago. So, right, so this one we know what the issue is. With the changes to put anonymous classes into the shared classes cache, we were fixing them up too late, doing conversions from invoke virtual to invoke special after the class had already been put in the shared classes cache. So Toby is taking a look at how to fix that. The answer may be that we stop doing this conversion and just rely on the invoke private mechanism that we introduced for Java 11. All right, and then everything else here looks to be older and would have been handled in previous meetings. I am slightly concerned that this list seems to be growing continually, so we should be taking some effort to try to burn this list down and to make sure that we've resolved, especially all the crashes that are showing up here. All right. Andrew, I don't see Andrew on the call, so I'm not sure if these graphs have been updated this week. Does anyone know if Andrew had a chance to update them?
Not sure. I don't think he's mentioned anything about it.
Okay. All right, then we'll skip over that. And we'll take a look at our roadmap and our reviews, or sorry, our releases. So 0.17, the last thing in this list says that no JDK 13 tag available yet. Is the JDK 13 tag available? I thought the builds had been done already, so this may just be out of date.
Yeah, it's old.
Yeah, as far as I know, the OpenJ9 ones are all done and out. So.
Do we know why the tag was so late in coming?
It just kind of came with an apology. Sorry guys, we forgot about it, and all the stuff we were doing was the message on the mailing list.
Okay. Great. I saw that there was a blog post from George on addressing the notarization on Mac. Is that completely fixed now for the 0.17 release?
It's fixed as much as it's going to be, and on the basis that Apple have relaxed the requirements, but it'll need some extra updates for the next release, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I was talking to George yesterday about having a tangible issue that described exactly what it is that needs to be done by when, in order to not fall foul of the next hardened and caused by Apple. So a bit of work in progress there to at least identify what it is that needs to be done by when.
Okay. That's great news. So that brings us then to a 0.17.1 release. It came to our attention that the OpenSSL libraries on bundled platforms, so on Mac and Windows, need to be updated, as there were some security fixes made available there that we have not yet applied. So that means that we're going to need to do a 0.17.1 release. And if we're going to go through the process of doing that, it makes sense to backport some of the user-raised issues and critical fixes that have gone in since we branched for 0.17, as it's now been some time since the code split back on September 22nd. So I just
so we are actually going to do a new OpenJ9 release for this?
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to take a look at what candidate fixes we have for that and make the final decision once we have a list of potential fixes. So
When
that
do you think we'll have that list?
That was just where I was going, was to see if we had thoughts on when we would need to have that list together by, and when we would want to get this release out the door. Have the hotspot JDK 13 builds at Adopt completed?
I think there's still one or two platforms to go out, but it's mostly there now.
Okay, so they should be done this week, though?
I would expect so, yeah.
Okay.
It's being done by the Microsoft team.
Okay, I just don't want to be in a situation where we're competing for resources with them. I'd like to make sure that they're able to.
Yeah, sure. I guess if we're doing a new OpenJ9 release, we'll be doing this across all platforms and not just the ones where we bundle OpenSSL.
Yes. So I think it seems reasonable for us to have that list of potential backport candidates by the end of this week. Does anyone think that they would need more time than that to be able to take a look through the backport items? So that would give us to basically November 1st to complete building that list.
That's just to build the list, not necessarily have the fixes available.
The fixes would only be things that have already been delivered and are being run and tested in the OpenJ9 build. So it would be having that full list by November 1st. And then I think it would be reasonable to have that list reviewed and agreed on before the next OpenJ9 call, so before November 6th.
I think we have quite a few open, unresolved issues that would be nice to have fixes for. There seem to be quite a few things that have been broken, worked in previous releases and broken in the 0.17 release. And I don't know that we have fixes for all of them yet, or that they're actively being investigated yet.
I can see both sides of that. I think it would be good to get those things fixed. I'm a little worried about how long of a timeline we're starting to drag this into, especially if we don't have fixes in hand for them yet.
Yeah, on the other hand, I don't know that we should be trying to rush a .1 out the door. Maybe we should consider kind of like end of November timeline. That would
It
give.
depends. I mean, obviously, the initial driver for this was getting the OpenSSL updates out, right?
Yeah, so the OpenSSL changes that we want have been available since I think it was March. So it's not like anybody's clamoring for them or that there weren't previous releases that had the same problems.
Is there a way for people who are using the OpenJ9 builds to use their own OpenSSL?
I don't think there's anything to stop them. I mean, I don't do anything special when I'm building it on Windows. So if someone wanted to build up their own one, then yes, I don't think it's very easily available elsewhere for download as a binary format.
But it's not hard to cause the JDK to use a different OpenSSL binary library than the one that got bundled.
I think you'd have to delete the bundled one, and then it would go searching elsewhere.
Yeah, or just replace the one that's in the JDK.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to see if there's a workaround that people could use that would relieve the.
Maybe we should just recommend that as a workaround for people who are concerned about it.
I think from the project perspective, would our customers know about it, or would they just expect us to be up to date? It's not something you would necessarily ask, I suspect, unless you were following OpenSSL updates.
I think they would expect us to be up to date. So the fact that we're
Exactly.
not, is,
So just on that topic, the idea we had, or rather Pete had, was to create an issue that tracks, that we move forward in each release, making sure that we validated that we're on the most recent version of OpenSSL to make sure that we don't run into this situation again. So we've got a plan in place to avoid putting ourselves in this position again. Now it's just a matter of how quickly do we need to have this resolved by, and how many other things do we have that we need to fix at the same time.
yeah, I get it, but in the meantime, there are actual CVEs that people using our builds are exposed to, right?
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I think the most important thing should be to close that window for anyone who's using OpenJ9 builds right now. Right. The other stuff is kind of, it would be nice, you're right, but if this OpenSSL issue hadn't happened, we wouldn't be doing a .1 release to fix all of those things.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because I'm concerned about if we're leaving this until the end of November. Is that the right decision? I'm not convinced it is.
I think we should, my opinion is we should straight line the getting a fix to customers, to anyone who's using this, to close off the CVEs that they're currently exposed to.
Well, if we wanted to fix it quickly, we could just rebuild Windows and Mac, and in theory, we could do that tomorrow. We don't need a 17.1 OpenJ9. We could just increment the extensions version number and respin.
Well, there's some setup to be done at Adopt to have those packages available at build time, I believe.
Yeah, have we actually verified that Mac has the old version still?
So the last nightly build has the old version, and there hasn't been a nightly build since October 17th. So I don't expect any changes at OpenJ9 are going to affect the builds at Adopt. We need to track down where that version is coming from at Adopt and make the change at Adopt.
Yeah, I've started having a look at the Windows side, but not Mac.
Okay.
So I think Mac is using with OpenSSL equals fetched. Does that not mean it pulls down the latest version?
No, it doesn't pull the latest version. It pulls the version that it's configured to pull. And as of October 17th, it was getting 111A. So there's a option that you pass into the get source script. I don't know what adopt is doing exactly, because I couldn't see anything in the actual build that showed where it came from, but it's still pulling down 111A, even though newer versions have been available for some time.
Yeah, okay, I can see where that's defined. I can get that updated straight away.
Okay. Would respinning the Mac and Windows platforms interfere with the other builds that are going on at Adopt right now?
The other builds, the remaining ones are on the sort of secondary platforms, if you like, so I would not have a concern with running these in parallel.
Okay, so given the discussion so far, it sounds like what we need to do is get those OpenSSL libraries updated and respin just those two affected platforms, plus an extensions repo change to get us a new version number. Is that an accurate summary of what we've said so far?
Simon, do we need an extensions repo change?
If I could answer for Simon, we don't actually need an extensions repo change, but if we respin without any changes, we won't have any different version numbers to show us that something has changed.
True, the adopt OpenJDK will add a suffix onto the file name at least. You'd have a 0.1 release from an adopt perspective.
I was thinking we could use the adopt build increment facilitator just to adopt one version from the adopt point of view.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, we'll just have that .1 suffix.
It will mean that customers can't tell by running Java version, which...
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think I would prefer to have the extensions changed to make it very clear that the version they're running is fixed or not.
Note that even with the extensions changed, they still won't be able to tell by running minus version. They would have to run -x internal version.
Yes.
I think that's acceptable as long as customers have a way to decide to figure out which, and we can tell them how to tell if they have the fix or not.
Customers and service, yes.
Right.
Okay. Can we get people signed up to do the required work? Simon, can you take on getting the extensions change made?
Yeah.
And then, Stuart, are you able to take the OpenSSL updates?
Yeah, I'm just submitting a pull request for the Mac one now, and the Windows stuff is on my list to get done in the next day or so anyway.
Okay. All right, so we should be able to get this updated in the next couple of days. Do you think we could have the builds running by Friday afternoon?
Seems reasonable.
Simon and I can probably get something through tomorrow, to be fair.
Okay, even better.
Or at least initiated.
There are some other local process implications I need to talk through with people. But yeah, so the builds should certainly be able to be done by then.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else we need to discuss on that?
The other question is, do we still want to do a 17.1 with some fixes?
That's my opinion.
which we don't have to decide now, because I don't think we have all the fixes we would want yet.
Yeah, I think it would still be useful to do the work to tag potential backport candidates. And once we have that list, we're in a better position to decide on the 17.1 at OpenJ9.
Yep. So we have tagged quite a few already, and we can see if anybody comes up with any more by the next meeting.
Yeah. So, Mark, if you can help spread that message through some of the JIT developers, that would be helpful as well.
Sure. Will do.
Just a reminder that the 018 release is coming up, the code split on December 16. So please take a look through what's in that milestone and make sure we're making progress on burning that list down as well. All right. Shelley, do you want to give us an update from Adopt?
I actually think we cover most of it when we do the release section earlier in this conversation. I don't think there's anything new here. We haven't completed the extending the Docker-based testing yet. So none of this is closed. I don't have an update on the time zone stuff. Simon, I presume maybe you might. Time zone updater.
Sorry, only that the gentleman who was working on it has been pulled off onto another project, so we're looking around for someone to carry on from where he left off.
Okay. I did notice an update in the time zone issue, but I think it was relating to using a different jar file, possibly from Azul. So maybe I'll have to look at that issue and see before I come back next week. And I believe also, I guess the other question, and maybe Stuart, you know the answer to this, for the Azure stuff, we actually have a live Adopt OpenJDK public cloud now for that. Is that the case? I think I saw a demo from Derek yesterday.
I haven't seen that.
Okay, I'll double check what I was watching when he was demoing. Okay. And why that's happening, or why that's being proposed, is it would allow us to have more Mac machines available to us, which is something that could be helpful to the project. Is that as it's not actually using Jenkins, we'd actually have to have ways to getting in at the test results and ways to integrate it. So it adds complexity that's probably not desired. Anyway, there's no closing of any of this stuff yet, so nothing to report, in other words.
All right, thanks, Shelley. Adam, do you want to give us an update on the machines?
Just before we move to machines, I'm just curious about the nightly builds that Adopt. Do we have an estimate to when those would be turned back on?
Yeah,
They basically get switched off during the release process. So normally we wouldn't put them back on until we've got all the platforms out, and because they haven't gone out yet, we haven't switched them back on. So yeah, as soon as that goes out, we'd put them back on again. I can ask the question as to whether we can put them on now or not. I think we're pretty much there with most of the platforms. So I'll speak to Martin about that later.
Yeah, I put a note in the Slack channel yesterday on it, and Martin said within the day or so.
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Adam, if you want to walk us through your update.
Not a whole lot this week. We're still setting up the AX machines. It's running into issues because the base image has changed, so playbook doesn't apply cleanly, and a lot of manual effort to figure out what to do. I know Joe was working on Windows OpenSSL changes, but he's having issues because some machines need to be poked from the OpenStack dashboard, and Tim is the only one with access to that. So that's kind of a pain point when we're dealing with those. Be nice to change that, but I'm not sure what the solution is. That's pretty much all I have to say. Unless there's questions.
Speaking of machines and Tim, we have 2 Windows machines offline, and because of that, we don't have the capacity to run the special system testing nightly on Windows. So we've turned it off briefly until we can get those machines back online.
Was away right now.
Yeah, we'll have to find a way to see if we can get somebody else access to that, because having that single point of failure there is problematic.
Yep. That's true of much of the infrastructure story we have. That bottlenecking is good.
Adam, can I ask that you follow up with Tim on this and see if he has an idea of how else he can get somebody added to that account?
Sure. Between me and Joe, we'll ask him. Sorry, did Charlie say he's away right now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Must be on vacation. I got a auto reply and
Okay. Any date?
I'll find it and send it to you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I don't see Sue, so I don't think there's an update on the website at this point. Is there any other business we want to discuss this week?
Sue did mention to me that there's going to be a docs milestone that tracks all the doc PRs, and she'd like if we move something out of the milestone for OpenJ9 that has an associated doc issue, she'd like us to move it in the docs milestone as well.
Seems reasonable.
The other thing I was discussing with her offline is ways that we can synchronize the code changes and the doc changes. So now we have developers creating PRs for doc changes, and those doc changes could be reviewed and merged before the code has actually been reviewed and merged. And it could be that subsequent reviews of the code actually change the documentation. So we should discuss ways of keeping the doc and the code in sync. I was hoping Sue would be on the call today.
Yeah, that's actually a concern that's been raised by a few developers here around the kind of the onus of that, making sure that process works well.
Yeah, so I've mentioned it to Sue, and I think the doc reviewers will at least try to check the code. Another possibility I was proposing is that the doc reviewers don't merge the doc change, and the person who's merging the code change would check that the doc is also ready to go and merge both at the same time.
I could definitely see wanting to get the code PRs in before the doc in some situations.
Yeah, so that's always an option. But when possible, if there's no rush, I would say we wait for if it's the same developer making the doc changes as making the code change, and should probably just wait for the doc change.
I can see situations where we want the code in undocumented because we want to let it run around for a bit before we put it in people's visibility, or before we brought more visibility. So
in those cases,
I'm fine with delaying the merging of the doc PR if the code PR isn't merged, but I'm not sure we want a hard rule that the two go in at the same time.
No, it wasn't a hard rule. It's just like a good practice. If the doc changes and the code changes are going to be merged at the same time, and hopefully the developer merging the code change would understand that, that developer, that committer could merge both at the same time.
Mark, you mentioned there were concerns about this process. Were there other concerns raised?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's mostly around, how is the committer supposed to track all of this stuff and make sure that all the right things are happening, I guess, is the sort of, that was one of the issues that was raised. I guess the other issue that was kind of brought up was, it felt like a decision was made about how this should work on this call, without, not all of the committers are able to participate on this call because of other commitments. And so, it came as a bit of a shock, I guess, to some people because they weren't able to join this call, and it just seemed like this decision got made about things they had to do that they didn't understand, and they didn't see all of the back and forth on it. So, maybe discussing this in the public committer Slack, or having an issue to discuss, how we handle this issue might have been more sort of inclusive, I guess, as a discussion. I guess one other thing we could try to could we just use the work in progress kind of tag that we use on other merges for the doc thing, and then kind of when the thing's been soaked appropriately, the developer should be able to make the decision about whether it's still work in progress or not, right?
This is for the case where we want to delay the doc sometime after the code has been in.
Right. But I guess the point is that you can open the doc issue anytime you want with a PR with a work in progress on it, and then when it's ready, when we think it's the right time to do that, we can kind of either make a decision when the actual change to the code base is being made. We can make the decision that the work in progress should be removed from the doc change at that point, or you can kind of make that decision at the time, right?
Yep.
Anyway, I still think we should kind of have this discussion in a way that the committers can all participate in it and express their views, since they're the ones who are going to have to kind of implement whatever the rules are that we come up with. We can seed the discussion, but I think it would be good to have their sort of involvement.
FYI that Sue did join the call, and I don't think we can rely on developers setting the doc PRs to work in progress. Maybe we could rely on the committers doing the right thing, but a developer could go ahead and open a doc PR, not realize they should be setting it work in progress. It could be reviewed and merged, unless somebody's checking that the code is also ready.
Sure. Yeah. It wouldn't be the only mechanism. You're right. I agree. It's not quite as simple as just relying on the whip.
But if there's a committer involved and the committer is paying attention, then maybe the committer can make sure the work in progress was labeled correctly. But if it's just any old random person creating a PR, they may not think to put it as work in progress. They may think it's ready to go, even though the code changes aren't ready to go.
Cool. I got it. Anyway, I guess the main point is that I think there's enough kind of subtleties around this, how this should work, that it's probably worthwhile getting the committers involved in that discussion, or at least giving them the opportunity to participate in the discussion.
Mark, I'd argue that we have given lots of opportunity for people to be involved in a variety of discussions, either in this call or by adding comments to the minutes or by opening an issue themselves or bringing this up on Slack. I'm not sure I agree with the phrasing that we've set it up so they aren't able to be involved.
Well, okay. I'm only reflecting what was kind of relayed to me in confidence. So, maybe we need to be more clearer that we're on the expectations that people review the notes and the minutes from this call, and if they have concerns or comments. But so my recollection was, this call ended a week ago. I wasn't on the call either, and then we kind of decided to do something that got communicated in the Slack channel, right? So there wasn't any kind of delay between discussing it on the call and committers being asked to do something differently. So that's kind of the, like, there was no lag there. If you weren't on this call last week, there was no kind of opportunity to participate in any discussion about it. You could complain about it and open a discussion, but
I'm not sure it was really open for discussion. We kind of lost the resource we had to have dedicated doc people that were going to write all the doc for us.
yeah, I get it. I'm not arguing. I'm not complaining about that. I'm not trying to say that we don't need to do something about it. There was at least a committer that was concerned about the way that this got communicated to the committers and how it was discussed by our community.
Yeah, there was also,
that's all I'm trying to reflect into this.
There was also an announcement at least 2 weeks ago that this was going to happen, and there was an item added to the agenda that there'd be a presentation on it last week. So there was pre-notice that this was going on.
There is a point, though, that a good point being raised, that we need to be sure that people are aware of these decisions, and then maybe that's making better use of our mailing list to mail out some of these bigger changes so that we're sure everybody's heard them, or using the committers Slack channel as an extra pointer to an issue so that people have an opportunity to weigh in, or at least are aware in more detail on what's being changed and what's happening.
I saw an update in both external and internal Slack channel on this topic.
We're down to less than a minute now. So I think we'll wrap discussion here. And if there's more that we need to discuss on this topic, let's take it into the committers channel on Slack. Thank you, everyone, for joining at this point, and I will stop the call here as we're effectively out of time. Thank you, everyone.